Picture this. You're in front of your latest prospect, closing the biggest deal of your life. Your pitch decks were perfect. Your scripts, flawless. And when the time came to answer the golden question of, are you ready to move forward? Nothing happened. For everyone who loves sales, this is their worst nightmare. But fear not, because in this podcast, we're unraveling the enigma behind those missed opportunities. From appointments that evaporate to presentations that felt like a Broadway show but ended in awkward silence, we're dissecting it all. Welcome to Love Your Sales.
This podcast is presented by GenHead. GenHead leverages AI so small and medium-sized businesses can find their ideal clients to make more sales. Other companies talk about AI, but we are using it every day to drive down marketing costs and increase revenue. Learn more at genhead.com. That's genhead.com.
Welcome to another episode of Love Your Sales. I am so thrilled. I am joined by Eric Forrestal, Master Communicator, Original Renegade from Workforce Renegades. Eric, welcome to the show. I am so excited to have this conversation.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
So what is Workforce Renegades and what do you do with your time?
Oh, wow. Workforce Renegades. So I create renegades in the workforce. I feel like every company needs a workforce renegade, someone that knows their sales, they can recruit, they can train what they do, and then they can lead a team. So what I try to do is make other master communicators and all those kind of pillars of a business. And yeah, like I said, create workforce renegades.
That's awesome, because one of the most important things to any business is being in my personal opinion, an over communicator.
Right.
But a good communicator and understanding how to appropriately communicate to different personalities, right?
Yeah. Different strokes for different folks. There's different ways to communicate with different people. The golden rule is treat everyone the way that you want to be treated, but I think it's a little bit more, you got to treat them the way that they want to be treated. So I try to instill that a little bit more and really show people how they can, if they have a message to deliver, how they may have to adapt their message to deliver it.
That's so well said. Because I used to do treat everybody the way that I want to be treated. And I realized really quickly that does not always work.
Yeah.
I'm a very bold personality.
Sure.
I'm one of those people who's, just get to the details and what you need, what you want. And I came to realize that there are people out there who really need the, hello, how are you today? And got myself in a little bit of trouble early on with not doing the niceties before the demands, they weren't so much the demand, but I find myself saying, hey, and then spilling out what I need and then going, I'm sorry. How you doing?
Sure thing.
So it used to be, treat people as you want to be treated, but at the same time, not everybody is like me.
Right.
My brother used to say like, oh, Monday niceties, I hate it. I don't want to work in an office anymore. And I'm like, a lot of people need that. Like other people, they don't.
Yeah.
So how do you, start getting people to understand? Because it's not that easy. It's how do you start to understand or help other people understand the nuances of other people's personalities?
Yeah, it's really tricky. And I've been in sales and team building and kind of this world of communication for, going on 20 years now. So I think it was a lot harder to explain before. I felt like I used to just tell people, oh, you just got to know, you just got to read them. You got to get a feel for the room, know your crowd, everything like that. I realized I had a really good knack for that. I grew up in a big family. I had 3 older brothers, an older sister, a stepmom, a stepdad, kind of doing both sides.
Right.
Sometimes I'm at mom, sometimes I'm at dad's, and I was the youngest. And so I always had to kind of figure out people's mannerisms and, you know, what brother I'm talking to and what I'm asking for, because they all communicated differently. So, you know, growing up through that and then just through kind of early on in my career, I just got good at it. But what I found was it was the hardest thing to train. You know, you can train scripts, you can train, you know, objection handling and all those things, but it was really hard to train how to read people. And it was a few years ago that I got reintroduced to DISC. Now, I'll explain what DISC is for anyone that doesn't know in a little bit, but basically it's a behavioral assessment. And I used to think behavioral assessments were the dumbest things. I would always say, you know, and if you've ever worked in sales or any sort of communication, you were probably forced to take some sort of behavioral assessment.
Right.
So for years, I thought they were dumb because I don't need an assessment to tell me that I'm loud and obnoxious, right? So it's kind of one of those things where any assessment I was taking, I'd say, well, what's the loud obnoxious one? Okay, yes, I'm an Enneagram 7, I'm a high D, high I, I'm a squiggly line, I'm whatever it is. It's like, okay, I get it. And so I always used to read those thinking it was, you know, all about me, me, me. It wasn't until, you know, I was doing real estate at the time and this lady came in and she gave a great presentation. And, you know, it was a 2-hour presentation. And as soon as she started talking, I do what most real estate agents do is I got in the back, I opened up my computer and I started answering emails, right? Because that's what a lot of us do. And there was about 10 minutes within this presentation where she said, this is how you identify it in others, and this is how you can adapt your communication style. And it was a great 10 minutes. And I walked up to her afterwards. I was like, that was a great presentation. This 10 minutes was my favorite part. You should do an entire presentation on just that 10 minutes. Like that would be worth it, you know? And I didn't know, like, I didn't realize what I said because then she just kind of put her hand on my shoulder and goes, well, what did you think about the other hour and 50 minutes? And I was like, oh, yeah, you know, and she was, you know, she was so nice. And she got, you know, she kind of looked at me and she said, well, maybe you should, if you're, you know, if you have a direction that you want to take it, maybe you should. And so she kind of started my journey on looking at DISC and behavioral assessments in a completely different way. And so she's actually the one that kind of bridged the gap for me to get certified in it and go through it. And for me, DISC was a really good vehicle to explain what I was trying to explain over the years.
Right.
You know, not everyone's going to come up and hand you an assessment and say, hey, this is how I communicate. Can you communicate with me like this? So I started looking at these profiles, and then I also started looking at how you can identify those profiles and then how you can adapt your communication style.
And it's real. So I've actually had people where I'm on a sales call and they've walked in the room, sat down and go, just so you know, I'm a high D. And I'm like,
a high D would say
okay,
that.
awesome. That is perfect because now I know how to present this information to you. Like if we all just walked around and go, hey, I'm a high I, like that's great. Okay, now I know how to communicate with or I know how better to communicate with you. Like you don't want to get lost in the details. You don't care how like the nuances of how it works. You just want to know what the outcome is going to be of that maybe. Or maybe you are somebody who needs to know the details of how it's going to work, depending on what your, where you fall on that scale. It absolutely will help me. Now, obviously, if you're walking into doing a group presentation, you're probably going to end up with a couple of, variety of different people in that room, a high C, a high D, a high I, and then you have to be able to adapt and cater to the questions or, the blah, blah, blah. But having an understanding and knowing somebody's, where their interests lie, where they're, get the most out of that conversation can change the outcome of a conversation 100%.
Yeah.
Same goes for when you are a high I and you're meeting with somebody who's definitely, let me tell you, I am energy, energy, energy. If I walk into an accounting firm,
Yep.
it's if I was to let that energy constantly be coming out, they'd be like, she needs to leave.
Right.
Like it just, I don't fit in.
Yeah.
They just,
Yeah. Well, that's why it's, yeah, it's, and those of you for, just so I can kind of maybe for anyone that's listening that doesn't know what disc is,
yes.
the best way I can describe disc is if you remember the last time you went to a restaurant and you went out to eat with a group of people, and the way that you can watch someone order off the menu and talk to the waiter is the way that they behave and they communicate, right? And so it's so funny because the waiter will come up and say, what can I get you guys? And she might be just starting with drinks. And right away, a high D is going to go, they know exactly what they're going to get because they get the same thing every time because they know what they like to eat and they know they're hungry. So if they got burgers on the menu, or they're going to go right away and they'll be the first to order and they'll say, I'll get a burger, medium rare, fries on the side, right? It's because they know they like burgers and they know they're hungry. So they're very direct, and they don't need anyone else's opinion or anything like that.
Mhm.
And then the waiter looks at the next person, and that person's just talking to everyone at the table. This person hasn't even looked at the menu. Yeah, they haven't even looked at the menu. And, the quick look at the menu, they may be, oh, can you come back around to me? Or they'll just make a quick panic decision and be like, you know what did you get? I'll take that. Because they really don't care about what they're getting. They care who they're there with. They care
Right.
who they're talking to, who's at the table, and they don't want to miss out on any of the conversation.
But I'm also a high D.
Yeah, and that's fine, but you'll be talking to everyone, and then what'll happen is they'll say, "What do you want?" They'll be like, a burger. I'm good." Right?
Right.
You'll be very direct in it. But the point of it is both of those two types are both extroverted. So they have no problem looking at the waiter and talking and saying what they want, and then also they have no problem, talking to everyone that's at the table.
Right.
And then you have that third type that's just a little bit more indecisive, where they want to make sure everyone else knows what they're getting, right? So they might start asking questions like, "Hey, did you see that they have not? Are you getting the nachos, or what are you getting?" They're more focused on the table and making sure that everyone's happy, everyone's satisfied. Hey, did you get that drink that you wanted? But they're really indecisive. The last thing that they want to do is make an opinion, or make an actual order. They might even ask the waiter what's good. They might even, just take what's special. Oh, what does the cook want to make? What do you have a lot of, right? They don't really want to like ruffle any feathers, and they just want everyone to have a good time.
Right.
And then you have that last type, that high C type, where as soon as they found out where they were going out to eat, they looked up the menu online and sat in the parking lot for 45 minutes looking at the menu to make sure that they know all of their options. And, they might come with questions, or they know exactly what they're getting before they get in there because they did the time to analyze it and calculate what's the best option for them. And so whenever I'm explaining discs to someone, that's the best way I can explain it, because everyone's been out to eat with a group of people. And then also everyone, when I talk about those things, everyone's like, yeah, you know what? I know someone that orders that way, or I order every time, you raised your hand as soon as the second time, you're like, yep, that's me right there. So we can all identify that. And that's just ordering off a menu. Just think about if we were to look at all the other mannerisms that people do in meetings, in the office, on phone calls, through emails, text messages, you name it. It's kind of one of those things that you can start to put votes in the right letter for, and then kind of understand how to adapt your communication.
And as you were saying that, I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm that person who like literally just shows up and I'm like, oh, what, I know what I like. And I'm like, do you have something like this on the menu? Great. That's what I want. Like, whereas like,
Yeah.
I know what I like to eat because we all know what we
Yeah.
like, but I'm not present until I'm there. Once I'm there, I'm present.
Sure.
I am where I am when I'm there.
Right.
But until I'm there, I'm still where I was.
Right.
Which drives I think my husband insane, because he's the guy who's looking up the menu, looking at the reviews, making sure it's like, and then talking about what our daughter is going to be able to eat when she goes there. She's 6. So, we want to make sure that, and I'm like, I don't care until we're there.
Right.
Like,
Right.
I don't know. Does that make me a bad mom? I'm not thinking, like, I show up when I show up and then I'm present. And maybe that is a personality flaw, but it's like, I'm not one of those people who has the capacity to plan until it's happening,
Yeah. And I mean,
which makes
so,
vacation really hard.
or really fun for you.
It's-
You know, I mean, come on. But some people, if you think about it, there's some people that really enjoy the planning of the vacation where it's like, I like to be surprised. And there's some people that like to know what they have to look forward to. And I ask my
Right.
son that all the time, where it's like, hey, do you want to know what we're doing or do you just want to do it? And he's a much more of I just want to go do it. Don't
Right.
question me on it. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's bad because you got to look at it in the sense of, if you look at DISC, there's four types of orientations. So you're either people oriented
Mhm.
or you're task oriented,
Right.
and you're either extroverted or you're introverted. And so if you look at those two orientations of people oriented or task oriented, the person that is planning the vacation is way more task oriented. They're way more, okay, I want to know where we're going. I'm going to look at, the best deal for the hotel room, the flights, all that. I'm going to make sure it's going to be planned to the bone, and I'm going to get a little bit annoyed if if it doesn't go to plan, you
Right.
know. And I'm like, what city are we going to? We just got to figure out how to get there, right? Like, I don't know why
Right.
there's all these plans. We just have to get there safely, right? Okay. And then when we get there, let's just figure it out. And so,
Right. Now planes, trains, and automobiles is just popping into
yeah,
my head as you have the picture. We just have to get there.
yeah, yeah, 100%. And it's kind of funny because, like, the reason I love that is those are both sales guys, right? So there's two
Right.
sales. And one character is, in a nice tie, a suit, he has everything planned. And then, the other one's John Candy. So
Right.
it's just, and they're both successful salesmen. That's the thing, is they're both good at what they do. It doesn't take anything
Right.
away. It's just you do it different ways. And I think it's such an approach where, I've trained so many salespeople, and everyone thinks that a good salesperson has to be an extrovert. That a good salesman has to be, this loud and obnoxious guy, and that's just not the case at all. And some of the best salespeople I've ever met or trained have been complete task-driven introverts, where
Right.
it's like they have the best relationships because if you get, if they have to build a relationship for them to talk. So they make sure to build a relationship, and then they're so organized in their tasks and making sure that they're doing everything, they're following up, they're doing all those things. And so yeah, so it's interesting. It's interesting. And I think the biggest thing that I like to do is show people their bright spots and their blind spots. So not only show them how they communicate, but go, hey, this is where you may have to take a deep breath and do a little bit more work when you're communicating with this type of person.
Right. And see, when you say a task-oriented person, I am 100% a task-oriented person. However, if you look at my disc results, you'd go, she's not at all. Yet,
Ah,
but I come from an HR background.
sure.
So there's process that, in place. Like,
Yeah.
and the reason I say I'm a task-oriented person, and this is just something that, I grew up with two parents who are in real estate.
Yeah.
Um, and so I grew up in a sales family, just 100% through and through sales. That is, you can't get any more sales than real estate agents who are on commission making their own, right? I mean,
Right.
it's just one of those things that my father managed, 60 plus agents at any given time. He managed one of the largest offices that they had there and continued, and he started with a very small office, continued to move up in the company. And then his wife was just a producer, not just a producer, was one of the top producers for the company for many
Was
years
the
running.
producer probably, yeah.
And he had always referred to, he's like, well, I'm a task oriented person. Like something comes in front of me and I get it done, move it off my plate so I know that I can move on to the next thing. Otherwise, you're just constantly having explosions happening, and that's when things fall through the cracks. That's how
Sure.
you lose clients. That's how you lose prospects. That's how you lose relationships. It's when you're not following up properly or you're not nurturing those relationships and doing what you promised. And that's why I don't promise something if I don't plan to deliver that. And so I create I treat every relationship as the next task, and I'm sounds like I'm minimizing that to something, but it really It's not. It's making it like bite-sized pieces of something that you can take on in a way that is and most people they're not built to do that. But I went to school for computer programming at one time. I went to school and I graduated with my bachelor's in HR. So that's, there's a process. And if you follow that, even being a complete spaz half the time, because I
Sure.
am a salesperson, if something's broken at my house, I go and fix it. When
Right.
it's done, it's done. And then I don't have to think about it. And it doesn't create lists upon lists upon lists of stuff that I'm like, oh my God, I have to get to that list. And oh my gosh, I have to which just
Right.
causes stress, especially for somebody who's an extrovert who just wants to be out there around people.
Yeah. 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 And I always, whenever I coach sales or teach people with sales, I always say lean on what you're good at first. Like understand what you're good at first. Right. And so I always laugh at people that go to a networking event because they know that they need to, because everyone else is doing it. And real estate agents and loan officers do this the most. I personally love networking events. It's funny because people always talk about the introvert that needs to be alone in order to go out. Right? You ever hear that where it's like, oh my God, I need my alone time. I have a thing tonight. I need to be alone before I go out. And it's just the opposite for an extrovert, where I need those networking events and I need to be around people in order for me to go back and work in my office.
Yes.
Like I need to go, if I'm working in an office with other people, I need to go to the break room and go chat it up with some people and say hi if I have an hour task that I need to do back in my office or whatever it is. But I always laugh at networking events because you can tell the people that don't want to be there. Like it's almost like they hang out together and don't talk together because they're like, hey, I'll stand here if you stand there, and I won't talk to you if you don't talk to me. Like it's like they have this like secret understanding, But I always tell people to lean in what they're good at. And so if you're good at those networking events, go to those networking events. Look, if you're good at building really, really good relationships and getting referrals based off of your past clients, lean into that and do, and it's kind of like, that's why I love DISC, because right away it rips off the Band-Aid of going, okay, let's talk, take your DISC. This is based off of an assessment that you took. Let's talk about it. And the first thing I do is I'll break it down and talk about what they feel is accurate and what they feel is inaccurate. And all I do is ask questions. I don't tell them anything. I just ask questions. And it's funny because they'll go along with this. They'll look at their assessment and they'll be like, oh, it's so accurate here. It's so accurate here. This is absolutely 100% me. The only part that is inaccurate is this negative thing that I don't like. Right? These two negative things that are on the assessment that says that I'm bad at, that's inaccurate. And it's like, okay, all right. So let's talk about that, And it's funny because you talked about those lists and all those things. It's just finding a way to do it, where I'm not a list guy either. I used to be really good at waking up in the morning and making a list of everything that I had to do today. Right. And then after about the second thing, it was like, drink coffee, go, drink coffee and eat breakfast. Cool. And then after that, I didn't do anything else that was on the list.
Right.
And I felt like a lot of people struggle with that. But what I started doing is I'd realize, okay, what am I doing for the next half hour? Okay, I need to do these 3 things in the next half hour.
Right.
Otherwise, I'll get distracted and I'll go somewhere else. Like, otherwise I'm over here. But what it allows me to do is it gives me a deadline of like, that's pretty quick, because if you give me all day to clean my house, it's going to take me all day to clean my house. But if you give me an hour to clean my house, it'll be clean in an hour. And there's some people that can absolutely write an entire list, and then they are the ones that like love going through it all day. And at the end of their day, they're like, when they're crossing off that last thing, it's the happiest thing for them,
Right.
So.
Right. And when I have a list of things to do, I get anxiety over that because I'm one of those people who are like, no, it needs to be done right now. I do it. And now I don't have a compiling list. It's like just done, 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 done.
I think the bad thing with me is I could think of 100 things that need to get done right now. Like if you were to ask me, give me 100 things that need to get done, I could list them all. But that's my problem is like what needs to get done. Well, there's a lot of stuff that needs to get done. What can I do right now? Like that's that.
And ultimately it comes down to what has to be done today.
Yeah.
What is their time? yeah, I'd love to redo my website. I'd love to I'd love to reorganize all the files in my entire drive, but
Yeah.
that doesn't need to be done today.
Right.
It's, for me, it's a matter of what keeps business moving forward right now. So what needs to get done today? And I refer to these as revenue generating tasks. What are my
Right.
revenue generating tasks that need to be done today in order to keep my business moving forward, in order to keep my clients' businesses moving forward? And that's
Right.
ultimately what that comes down to, because you're right. Everybody has a million and 10 things that they could do today, and including, feeding my child, my dog,
Right.
all of the other, but
Right.
those don't go on the list. Those are things that you sit in the back, that they in the back of your head when all of a sudden you're like, wow, I have 2 hours of time.
Right.
I could actually get some of this other stuff done.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's wildly, it's so interesting. And not only disc, but I also, have you ever heard of the working genius?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I think that's a very relatable thing. And I think a lot of that's derived from DISC.
I got mad when I saw my results, but they're correct.
Yeah.
They are 100% correct.
Well, I think there's a difference between two. Like another part of what I do is what's called key motivators. Because I think there's one thing in the way that we behave and communicate, but then there's another way of what we're motivated by doing, right? So there's kind of like you're talking about two different things there. And the way we communicate and behave is always interesting to me because it can change. It can intentionally change or it can unintentionally change. Whereas what I notice with a lot of people, when they have kids, the way they behave and communicate can change. Sometimes their D, all of a sudden they were very low on the D and they were never dominant. Well, now they got to be yelling at kid, they got to yell at their kid all the time, depending on what age their kid is. Or it's the complete opposite, where if they didn't have, if they were very low on the high S, where they weren't patient at all, and all of a sudden they have a kid and they take their disc, 6 months after, all of a sudden they're way more patient and they care about different things and they communicate differently and all those things. I always tell a story between 2022 and 2023. I had my natural and adaptive scores, where my natural score, I was a high D, a high I, and a moderate S, always a low C. Where if I send you an email, you're probably going to have a spelling error unless someone checked it for me. But so I realized that in my adaptive, my D was going even higher and my S was sinking really low. And so I noticed, I was like, okay, so in my adaptive state, meaning if there's an issue with a client, if there's something different, all of a sudden my patience was going down and my high D was going up. And I was like, whoa, okay, got to look at this. So basically I was becoming an asshole. Like, I don't know, there's no other way to put it. Like I remember looking at that and being like, oh man, so whenever you get stressed, you just act out of pocket like that. And I remember it was a thing that I could look back on and be like, okay, where did things go wrong with this client? Where did things go wrong with this person that I'm working with, or however it went? I was like, well, dude, this is it. It's clear as day. So I literally started using green notepads and green Post-its just to remember to keep my patience. So I'd be on the phone and all of a sudden I'd look at a green Post-it and I'd be like, oh, all right, Musab, or whatever, whatever I would say to myself down. And that was an intention. Yeah. And that was an intentional change where it was like, hey, like at least be consistent. So now I'm at least just an asshole all the time, right? Like my natural and adaptive are the same. No. Like overall my S went down a little bit, but now my natural and adaptive are the same, where I started to notice those times where I'd get stressed or act a little bit differently. Now fast forward from 2023 to 2024, earlier this year when I took it, I had started Workforce Renegades, a year or two ago. Well, I'm it. Like I'm here at Workforce Renegades. So there's no one looking over my shoulder, checking my budgets. There's no one doing any of these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, my analytical skills were always low. Like they were always below a 5. I just felt like there was always an accountant somewhere that could look over my stuff for me. Well, just inherently, because I have to look at my calendar. I have to look at the spell check on my emails. I have to do those things. Not saying it went up a crazy amount, but my analytical skills got better just because I got thrown into a position where I had to do it a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
So my C in 2024 was the highest it's ever been. It's still only at a 16, but that's pretty good, right? I mean, compared to what it was. So The interesting thing about disc for me is always that you can intentionally change, where if you're like, you know what, I'm in a leadership position and I need to be more direct. Like I beat
Mhm.
around the bush too much and people walk over me. I need to be more direct. That's an intentional change that you can make. It's an
Right.
uncomfortable one, but
And
it's
I've, because of how direct I know that I have been
yeah,
with certain I've had to peel that back and find that empathetic side with certain people.
right.
Because I know that I can come off as kind of a bitch. Like
Yeah.
you walk up to somebody and you're like, "Here, I need you to do blah 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 blah," and then all of a sudden, and there have been times where I'm like, "Oh, I need to
Yeah.
sorry, 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 sorry. How was your weekend?"
Yeah. But
And
here's
they'll
the
go,
thing.
"It's okay. I know that you can do that." And I'm like, "No, but it's rude. Like I should at least like ask you." And they're like, "Well, I appreciate that you're trying to make the effort." And I'm like, I know, but I can be really overwhelming at times, and I'll call myself out because it's like, and I tell my people too, like it's okay to do it in an appropriate manner if
Yeah.
I'm being too if I'm being too direct, if I'm being inappropriate, like you in an appropriate manner in an appropriate situation, you need to tell me because I don't know if I am. And I've had some of them be like, "Okay, that was a little much." And I'm like, "Okay, then I'm going to apologize and I
Yeah.
want to thank you for telling me because and again, because I've learned from my own
Yeah,
person."
well, I think it goes both ways. And I'm going to say a couple things there because I think it all depends on what message you're trying to deliver and who you're trying to deliver it to, right? So if you have a team and you're just trying to you're trying to give orders, like I think a big thing is for them more to understand that you're direct.
Right.
Right. So if this is the way you communicate and this is the way that you are, I think it's them understanding it and saying, "Hey, I'm not abrasive. I'm not being a bitch. This is just like on a daily. I
Right.
shouldn't have to adapt to everyone right away." Now, here's another thing. If you're coaching someone, that's different. So it's like one thing if you're directing an order or if you're, running a meeting, like you have to communicate in your exact way. Now, if me and you are doing a one-on-one and you're coaching me on what I'm doing, then you kind of have to understand my communication style. That
Right.
point, that's where you go, okay, all right. Well, Eric, how was your weekend? Tell me
Right.
everything about it, right? And so I think that there's that difference because if you're just caught in an adaptive space all the time, you're going to end
Right.
up hating you. You're going to hate the leadership position if you have to be
Right.
soft and, like be a little bit easy on everyone. Now, with sales, it's interesting because I'll give workshops and presentations, and I always ask, like, I always raise show of hands, how many of us have a favorite client? And I'll hear stories of people's favorite clients, and my favorite ones are the ones, the ones that buy cash and whatever. And it's like, no, what I mean by like, do you find yourself with the same type of client again and again and again? Like, and there you do typically people gravitate
Mhm.
towards the people they communicate best with. So if I'm very
Right.
direct, I'm going to get along with very direct people. If I'm
Mhm.
very, if you ask me about my day and I actually tell you about my entire day, I'm going to get along with people that tell me about their entire day, and
Right.
we can go back and forth and we can sit here and bullshit for 20 minutes before we actually get into the meat of it. I'm not a numbers guy. So my hardest clients, the clients that I didn't like, were the numbers guys, right? Because we all have clients where it's like, you look at them and you're like, why are you the way that you are? Like, why are you asking me that question right now? And it would happen all the time in real estate. It would be like I'd show someone the perfect house. I knew the numbers made sense because, I've been looking at the numbers for the past couple days. And then I say, all right, this seems like the perfect house. You guys don't have any objections. And it was always that higher C that would be like, well, we want to sleep on it. And me knowing that there's already two offers on the house and they're making a decision at 8 p.m. and it's 5, I'm like, so are you gonna like go home and take a quick nap, or because this house isn't gonna be here tomorrow? And then I would rub them the wrong way because here I was trying to pressure them where at the end of the day they needed more numbers and time to think. So I kind of switched it up where I'd be a little bit more direct with them, but I'd make sure, hey, what numbers are you going to need? What numbers are important to you? Let me
Right.
get you this before we even go to the showing. Hey, I just want to let you know, in this market, there's a good chance that there might be an offer on the house and we might need to make a decision after the showing. So I just want you to be
Right.
prepared for that, Now, high
Right.
I, if I show a high I, a shit ton of numbers before the showing, they're going to be like, I can't afford it. Or
Right.
like, it's going to be a waste of both of our times, because they're just going to want to fall in love with the house and then figure out how to make it work afterwards. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, that's how I bought my house. And because my parents were real estate agents, I literally walked in, I looked at my dad and I said, "Can I afford this?" And he goes, "No, but you can make it work."
Yeah. Right. Right. Right.
I'm
Good
like,
sales guy
"Okay."
right there. Love the honesty.
And we bought it and we've made it work. We've lived here now for 5 years. So,
That's funny.
but it's great when you have your parents who are real estate agents, so they can really, it's pretty easy conversation. "Hey dad, you know my finances. Can I buy this?" He's like,
Right.
but
Right.
anyways, we are coming to time, but it's it's such an interesting dynamic. Like, again, like I'm gonna flash back here for a second to 20 years ago when, I've taken, when did discs start? Like, when did I
Yeah, the 1920s, actually.
okay, so it's been around
Believe it
that
or
long
not, by
time,
this
but
by a psychologist that actually invented Wonder Woman. Believe it or not.
wow. Very
I
interesting.
know. Fun
Random
fact.
facts. Fun
Yeah.
fact. Okay. So, I've taken disc, over the years a million times. And as I've evolved as a person, my results have evolved, over time. Consistently, I've always been a high I, always had that high D, but they've shifted a little bit over as I have always, however, found it interesting, and I now find it even more interesting how we're able to use that to not understand ourselves as much as we're using it to understand other people. And I love people. I'm the person who, if I go to a networking meeting, if I stay
Yeah.
too late, then I come home and I'm like all wound up. And my husband's like, "Aren't you tired?" And I'm like, "I could go 3 rounds in a ring with Mike Tyson right now." Like,
Talk
that's,
to me. Come on.
I know that's where I get my energy. I'm like, "Oh my God," it's like, give me a shot of, something so I can calm down. But I just, I love the study of humans. So this
Yeah.
conversation has been really, really fun. So I am going to give you your 30-second pitch before we wrap up. Shameless pitch. There you go.
Yeah, sure. So I do one-on-one coaching, I do consulting, and I do workshops. So everything is based around your DISC assessment. And what I really like to show people is what they're already doing, how to build intention behind it, and really show you your bright spots and then also your blind spots. So I've been in sales for over 20 years. I do sales, recruiting, training, and leadership for more service industry and blue collar companies, companies in the trades is kind of, my wheelhouse. So
And
that's where we're at.
where can they reach out to you?
Yeah, they can either find, you can look up Workforce Renegades online. www.workforcerenegades.com is going to be the easiest way. Otherwise, we're on all the social media platforms as well.
And your website information will be on the show notes. So if somebody wants to reach out to Eric, you can find that information there. Eric, this has been such an awesome conversation. I really do appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
This podcast is presented by Accelerate Growth 45, your one-stop shop for business growth. Stop running your business like an operator, delaying wealth creation, and sacrificing your time. Instead, focus on building a valuable business asset, creating lasting wealth, and reclaiming the time you deserve. Accelerate your growth today and visit us at accelerategrowth45.com.
Thanks for joining us for Love Your Sales. For more, connect with Leighann on LinkedIn and be sure to subscribe to the show and leave us a rating and review. We'd love to hear what you think. Looking for a way to take your sales process to the next level? Visit us at loveyoursales.com to find out more about how Leighann can take your organization to new revenue heights. And be sure to join us next time for more great ways to love your customers so they love your sales.